Well, I'm joined now by Roger Gray, a former firearms officer of SO19, the firearms unit of the Metropolitan Police from 1991 to 1998. He had 27 officers under his control. And Ken Hines is a gang mediator in this area and chair of the Haringey Stop and Search Monitoring Group. Roger Gray, a lot of people are struggling to understand how a man can be found to be unarmed,
yes, and
yet it was a lawful killing. Can you explain that?
Well, basically, the intelligence leading up to this suggested very strongly that there were firearms. We understand that in Mr. Duggan's background, there was a history of firearms and gang membership. So, you know, there's a strong suspicion in the first place. If you find yourself in a situation where you earnestly believe that firearms are present, and something occurs in a situation which you perceive to be, and genuinely perceive to be, a threat to life, then you react to it quite properly, as if it were real.
But the officer's evidence
yeah,
was that he saw the gun.
Yeah.
And the jury have said he wasn't carrying a gun. They don't believe that he saw the gun.
No, the officer then obviously believed that it was a gun. Otherwise, he wouldn't have reacted in the way that he did. So the fact that if it is now established that it wasn't a gun is not countered by the fact that the officer genuinely believed that it was.
Ken Hines, what has this done to your work?
It's made my work even increasingly more difficult. I work as part of the Haringey Stop and Search Monitoring Group, so I do liaise with the police on stop and search issues. And don't forget, this was a hard stop that they've done Mark on. And you rightfully said this, that Mark did not have a gun on him. So how could it be lawful killing when he wasn't posing a threat? Now, if well,
the jury found that he did have a gun with him in the car. They found that he had that gun and that he disposed of it. That is ultimately the reason why he was killed, isn't it?
And he disposed of it. How did it get in the grassland area? I would say this much to you. Mark didn't have it in his hand when he got out of the cab, but yet the gun was found in the grassland area, some 20 feet away from him.
Right, just pause there, both of you, for a moment, because we've been joined, I will come back to you, but we've been joined now from New Scotland Yard by the man you saw trying to speak on the steps of the court earlier today, Assistant Commissioner Mark Rowley. You said on those steps that you wanted a meeting with the Duggan family. What is it you think you can now say to them that will offer any comfort?
I think that meeting's a private meeting between myself and the family. As I said at the start of that statement, though, the important thing from our perspective is to re-emphasise that no operation is ever started with the aim of killing anybody. It's always a tragedy, and we still want to express our sympathies to the family. However, the jury in this case, 10 ordinary men and women from London who spent 3 months looking at the evidence, not some of the sort of nonsense and theories you can find on the internet, they concluded that it was lawful killing.
Well, they also found that your officers failed when it came to handling the intelligence about Mark Duggan and that weapon. Now, that presumably means that Mark Duggan's death was avoidable.
You're now putting words in the mouth of the jury, which is not what you should be doing or I should be doing.
One of the jury findings...
No, that wasn't what they said. That wasn't what they said. Let me answer the question. They made some comments about the intelligence, and they said that they thought there ought to be more intelligence in advance, which may have altered the actions the police take. They didn't give any suggestions as to how that would have been done. We will look at that and see if there's anything we can do differently. But they consider the situation, they consider the firearms operation, which they said was well planned, they consider the actions of V53, the split-second decisions as Mark Duggan gets out of the car, throws the weapon, whilst he's being confronted by V53 fires. They concluded that he had an honest and reasonable belief that he had to pull the trigger and fire the shots that unfortunately killed Mark Duggan. And they came to the conclusion it was lawful. And that is what the jury concluded, and we shouldn't be putting words and other stories around it. It's very tragic, but we need to stick very clearly to what the jury have said.
Right, but let's be very clear. One of the findings does go against the police, that you didn't handle the intelligence as well as you could have done. So is it your conclusion that Mark Duggan's death was unavoidable?
I'm not going to second guess the view of the jury. My conclusion is that the jury have said this was lawful. The firearms operation was well planned, it was lawful. They said they wondered whether intelligence work could have been better in advance. They didn't say how. We will look at whether it could have done. But their conclusion was this was lawful. Every day, 3,000 times a year, we're running firearms operations in London. Several times a day, firearms officers are drawing weapons, confronting threats to bring down gun crime in London. We aim to put people in prison for long periods. We aim to take firearms off the streets. We do that day in and day out. Of those thousands of operations a year, 1 or 2 a year occasions officers fire shots. That shows how careful and professional they are, and that shows our determination to use force as little as possible. But every one of these operations must be reviewed, and if there's anything we can learn to improve, then of course we will do, because that's being professional. But Londoners should be confident about the scale of our effort to protect them from gun crime and about our care in using as minimum force as possible.
In your statement today, you acknowledged that trust in the police is not shared by everybody. You came out today outside the court and you were shouted down. People were shouting murderer at you. And I just wonder how you feel about that moment and what you're going to do to reach out to those people who are shouting at you. Or do you feel they're unreachable?
The police service needs the trust of all communities, and that clearly wasn't there today. An incident as symbolic and as tragic as this one, and what then followed it, particularly in Tottenham, stretches and creates tension in community relations. We think we've achieved a lot in the last 2 years. We've improved, for example, the way we do stop and search. We do 20% less and are more effective in targeting against criminals. And there's many community leaders have said that we've made improvements in the last 2 years. But relations aren't perfect, and there's more we need to do. We've been talking to community leaders during the course of this inquest, and we'll continue to do now. And we'd encourage them to talk to us, because we want everyone's trust if we're to make London and Tottenham as safe as possible.
A lot of them tonight are saying all their work has been set back years.
There's going to be a lot of commentary and sort of immediate reaction today. I think we need some sober reflection. 10 ordinary men and women from across London have come to a conclusion this was lawful. I think we need to reflect. We need to get around the table together, and we need to work out what we do next together.
I mean, ultimately, do you feel the truth about Mark Duggan is not really being seen here? I mean, your statement, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but your statement seemed to liken him to the most serious criminals in the country.
I think there was lots said about Mark Duggan's character and his background and what he was involved with in court, and I think it's best that you take that from the court rather than my attempt at summarising it at this sensitive time. What I would refer back to is the jury concluded here was a man who collected a weapon from another criminal, Kevin Hutchinson Foster, who's gone to prison for that supply of that weapon as it happens. He collects a weapon, he has a weapon in a taxi, and he's confronted by police officers. The armed operation was set out with the simple intent of arresting a dangerous man, dangerous by definition of the fact he's collected a gun and potentially going to use it on somebody else. They set out to arrest him, to put him in prison for a long time to protect the public, and to take a weapon off the streets. That was their intention. Nobody ever wanted anybody to die.
They were shouting no justice, no peace at you, and they have been elsewhere. What's your message to them?
It's a very emotive time, and you can understand the upset outside court from people interested in this case, but as much as when they were shouting and swearing and spitting at me, they were exercising their democratic right to process. Part of a democracy is the rule of law, and a jury has considered this for 3 months and come to a conclusion.
Assistant Commissioner, thank you very much for joining us. Let me come back to Roger Gray and Ken Hines. You couldn't hear what the Assistant Commissioner was saying, but Ken Hines, one of the points he was making was that they have been making great strides in terms of stop and search and sensitive policing. Is that your experience here? My experience is I got stopped half an hour ago, stop and search by the police. You were stopped? I was stop and search, going to an interview at Sky's studios on the Mill Bank, and I was held up for 45 minutes by the police. Now, I've got they threatened to take my car away, they searched me, they humiliated me for 45 minutes. Then they released me with no charge. Now, I'm saying if things has changed, why am I still being affected? People like me still being affected, and I'm there trying to help the situation. But in fact, I've been hinted at every avenue, it seems like. There's no change. Roger Gray?
Well, I'm not going to comment on an incident I'm not very close to, but I would like to return to the subject matter that we're here about tonight. And there was the conversation we had about the presence of the firearm being found nearby. What has been established, as I understand it, is that there was no firearm on Mark Duggan when he was on the floor after he had been shot. Doesn't seem to be anybody that says that he got out of the firearm with or without, out of the cab with or without a firearm. And I have been to the venue and I have seen it. It's an elevated walkway. Next to it is a very high fence, and beside it is a descending grassland. A firearm is a dense metal object. Were it thrown early in the proceedings, it would go quite a distance. 20 feet is quite achievable.
Okay, so you think it's
does anybody really believe the Met officers are walking around with guns to pick people up?
Can I come back to that? Because it's quite clear the minicab windows could not open, and the only way that gun could have been thrown if it was from an open door, which no one had ever seen. When Mark got out, he got up with his hands up with a BlackBerry mobile phone in his right hand. It's unacceptable that you can be shot under those circumstances. And not only that, he shot his own colleague. What's all that about?
Clearly, we can't retry this inquest and rehear the evidence. But the point is, you've got community leaders, not just kids on the streets, who now don't believe the police, who think that you made up the evidence, who now have no confidence in you as an organisation in areas like this. That's got to be a huge problem for you, regardless of what you think the truth is.
We don't think we know.
I'm not speaking for the Metropolitan Police Force. I'm speaking for myself on the basis of my experience, and I'm speaking about this particular incident. And I appeal, to the public there to think logically about this. Do they really, honestly believe that police firearms officers are on the streets carrying a spare firearm so that if there is an exchange of fire, they're going to fit somebody up? And the answer is, of course, no, they're not.
Ken Hines, let me just finally ask you. A policeman says his life was in danger. He thought he was going to be shot. What should he have done?
Use his taser. It's a cop-out. They had the area sealed. It was only Mark that was there. They had the area sealed. They don't need to do anything there, but yet they felt the need to kill him.
Stop making fucking story with that. Don't make no story with that.
Right. You see, I'll tell you.
Well, actually, while we're talking, this is actually the. I'm sorry about the language you heard, but this is actually the group of the family and supporters who are making their way back through. So I apologise for that. But look, on that note, a no agreement here, obviously, but we're going to discuss more of this later on in the programme. For now, over to Kathy in the studio for more of the day's news.
Thanks, Krish.